Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to ZeroGrade Talks. This is the space where we slow down the noise and examine what really shapes modern organizations, governance, leadership, technology, and the systems that either hold under pressure or quietly fail. I am your host, Marian Bolous, a strategic advisor in AI governance and systems design. And today's conversation sits at the intersection of change management, ESG, and organizational trust. For decades, consulting has largely followed a predictable rhythm: assess, analyze, present, recommend. But something fundamentally has shifted. Boards are under new accountability pressures. ESG is no longer an optional disclosure exercise. And clients no longer want reports, they want outcomes. Today, we're exploring what that means for leaders, for consultants, and for governance itself. Because if ESG is becoming business strategy, and I believe it is, then the way we deliver change must evolve with it. And that's exactly where today's guest comes in. I am honored to welcome Phillip Collard. Phillip brings more than 30 years of management consulting experience across large and medium-sized organizations. His career spans high-stakes environments where compliance, operational precision, and governance discipline are non-negotiable. But what makes Phillip's journey particularly compelling is that he did not stop at consulting. He became a founder not just once, 3 times. And through that transition, he confronted a truth many leaders eventually discover. When everything depends on one person having the right answer, scale becomes impossible. Phillip co-founded myConsole alongside Eric Sander, former managing director and partner at Accenture, to address what they saw as a structural gap in consulting and ESG transformation. Not a strategy gap, not a reporting gap, an execution gap. Their platform rethinks governance, ESG collaboration, compliance workflows, and change delivery, moving away from static documents and toward embedded operational systems. Today, we are exploring what happens when governance becomes infrastructure, when ESG becomes strategy, and when change management evolves from advice to execution. Phillip, welcome to ZeroGrade Talks. We're so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me along, Marian.
Absolutely my pleasure, sir. So, Phillip, you've spent 3 decades inside complex organizations. What has fundamentally changed in how organizations expect consultants to deliver value today?
I think there has been a systemic change in how clients want to receive information. Historically, people would send reports and presentations and documents for really to deliver the end, but actually that's often the beginning, because a lot of those advisory reports would be making recommendations of how to improve the business. And let's be honest, the company now has the challenge without the consultants to embed those recommendations. And clearly, what organizations really truly need, and I think this is where the change has happened, is that organizations do now want the consultants to hold their hands and to be part of this actual environment, to actually help them. So the real issue that's arisen, and because of technology, the opportunity is using technology platforms, collaboration platforms. The client and the consultants can work together in harmony in real time. Tasks can be handled and shared and allocated across both internal teams and external teams. And you can bring in a lot of other stakeholders into this environment. It's almost an ecosystem, a collaborative ecosystem to achieve the change that the consultant formally would be recommending.
Understood. So as you've mentioned, that clients no longer want reports and PowerPoints telling them what to do. They want hands-on involvement in delivering change. I'm curious, what broke in the old model?
Well, I think we can see what is breaking already with the rise of AI. You can see the impacts that younger people are no longer required because the senior leadership team believe that they can get efficiencies from using AI. Now, I'm not going to get into the AI space at this moment, but there is an expectation that technology does help. The things that have broken is actually the consultants perhaps are working across 3 or 4 different client groups. They all have different legacy systems, and the client is not really engaging on the operational delivery aspects inside clients. What they're often focusing on is their role, their delivery of their deliverable. And it's almost doesn't matter
Yeah.
what the client then has to struggle to interpret that. And that's
Yeah.
sometimes not realized by our
So where do we see change initiatives mostly commonly stalled?
There is a fundamental problem with consultancy because clients want increasing value. We've all seen that technology does lower prices and make things more affordable for clients. And so they've got declining budgets. So everybody's being squeezed. And I think where an organization has got the pressures that they're under, and the leadership teams do have huge amounts of pressures, which they're trying to juggle and deal with, they're looking to maximize that spend. And a lot of organizations are struggling internally because they don't have the internal teams to actually dissipate and execute the challenges of change. And so they sort of think, well, let's get people in to help us do that. Now, if they're not really hands-on, there comes the problem. And the historic model is that the senior leadership in consultants, and forgive me for sharing this, will push this down to younger people who will use a playbook to go into organizations, and there you go. So the problem then is that the internal client team go, oh, these kids don't know anything, and then you get that tension. So it does break down. It does break down a lot, and people get, you do get the accusation of they're just borrowing the watch and telling us the time, which sometimes is true, but this is where it's actually falling down. What as I've said, the opportunity now is for consultants to recognize that they can go in with a differentiated offer to their client and actually offer them a collaborative environment as part of their service array.
Understood. It sounds like what you're describing isn't a competence problem, it's a translation problem. So strategy gets written, intent gets approved, but somewhere between recommendation and execution, alignment fractures. Would that be fair?
Well, that will depend on the actual project itself, but it's very easy for a consultant to believe what they are delivering exactly what the client wants, and it's very easy for a client to have a completely different set of expectations because the consultant could be working for many clients, and so there is a tendency to try and to I don't know, sort of standardize or formalize an approach, and here you go. But I'm not saying that's always the case. The alignment or the breakdown in alignment will always come through lack of governance during the execution of a project. And if there is, there's some clients will want to have lots of meetings, lots of chats, fireside chats to talk about it, and others will be wanting to do a lot of engagement with internal teams. But the real challenge is the requirement for a proper managed project execution workflow. There needs to be formal processes and sign off throughout that delivery period. If it's just a one-off report or a one-off compliance or a policy statement, fine, I can see that being a lot easier. But if this is an ongoing year-on-year change, actually the organization, the client themselves should actually pull this consultancy into their own governance, because if it's not, then that's going to cause a risk, well, an unwritten risk, which they're not really absorbing or recognizing.
Understood. Philip, you've said something powerful, that ESG will simply become business strategy in the future. And that's not a marketing statement. That's a governance shift, like you just mentioned. And I would love to hear a bit more from you. What do you mean by that?
Well, ESG has got a little bit of a bad rap at the moment because it's seen as checklists. But if you look at the sustainability evolution, if you go back sort of 10 years, probably 2015, it was greenwashing. It was pretty much driven by the PR narrative. It was limited. There was selected data capture. The accuracy was not a major concern, and people were doing these in standalone activities, very manually organized and very probably very expensive. But the motivations were performative, where they were trying to message something fantastic about which could be not true, and hence the word greenwash. And there was no ability or governance to check with that. Not that anybody was doing it anyway, was checking to see whether that validated. So round about 2020, you started to get more of the sort of the motivations of ESG were driven by disclosures. Very holistic, organized. The data capture was thought that people had the data inside their organization. And it was just about pulling this out, creating policies, creating compliance documentation, often made up by people inside, not even part of the strategy and the vision of the company, but let's get through this because we have a deadline every year to get this compliance. Perhaps for something like an EcoVadis, where they're trying to get EcoVadis Gold or something like this. So it was a sort of a hygiene approach to ESG and the tick list. There was a belief that there still is the belief that the data still exists in the client, and they will spend a lot of money trying to pull it out and automate to Excel sheets and APIs where it's Excel sheets. But the problem comes is when you start thinking of the future. And we see this, and this is why I say ESG in 10 years or 5-10 years will just be called business strategy, because every single initiative, every single campaign, every single activity that a business does will need to have some sort of impact measure, something targeted, either environmental or social targets or governance targets, and they will need to be monitored, measured, and reported. Now, if you don't have a system, the data architecture in the system, for every single project to be capturing and targeting what those targets are and to be reported, then you've got a real problem. So that's how I see that a purpose-driven company will have all of their activities as business strategies with the ability to measure impact progress in real time. That's the difference. And if you do have it in real time and you are collecting and curating your own accurate data, you then have the ability to undertake audit trails. This is the critical factor. And obviously with platforms such as ours, where you can give sort of auditors access to come into the platform and to see where the data came from, who gave you the data, what additional data has been attached as evidence and proof, maybe photos of meters or documents or access to documentation. That data accuracy then becomes critically important.
Absolutely.
It's all about governance. It's all about governance.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. I agree with you. And those are real field problems that you face when you're on the ground running with it. And they build up and they do become a hindrance as they scale with the initiative and the organization. So I want to ask you, when did you realize ESG was no longer just about compliance, but about operational performance?
Well, I can't take full credit for this because my co-director, Nick Elliott, who is a global sustainability consultant in his own right, he has been our North Star in helping us understand about ESG and to design our platform. And it's through engagements with Nick that have allowed us our thinking to come about. It's the same sort of role that Eric Sandor took, was with the sort of the mentoring and the expertise that you get from talking to really intelligent, fantastic people that fundamentally understand. So it's my North Star on sustainability. That's informed our thinking a lot, talking to experts.
Amazing. So how are large supplier ecosystems changing under ESG pressure?
I'm going to turn the question around a little bit, because I think it's really about the organization. And the reality is the organization managing one of the key risk areas? And one of the key risk areas is their supply chain. And quite honestly, if they have not got a full risk analysis across their supply chains, one of their deliverables in their organization, one of the key levers of how they work should be about managing supply chain risk. Because as we've seen, obviously, when it becomes very acute when you hear of things like production, like for Jaguar recently had a production issue, and lots of, when the war is on, the war in Russia and Ukraine, the impacts of supply chains becomes very glaringly obvious in the news. Organizations really do need to have a complete grip on their risks. And the great thing about ESG is it provides that format, that framework for risks across supply chains to be properly curated, aligned, managed, assessed, and reported. And when you put them into dashboards, when you use all those assessment tools and ability to pull out information from, which we can provide to pull out information from the suppliers, you can have live dashboards at any one time, which obviously informs thinking and helps.
Absolutely. So is this where we can say like boards misunderstand the scope of ESG demands?
I think the problem is historically there's only been really two metrics or KPIs that the board has been focused on: revenue, profit. And I think the great thing about ESG, and I think this is a board discovery, and I think this is, whilst it's very voluntary at the moment, and in certain sectors they're more advanced than others, particularly like in pharmaceuticals, are very advanced in adoption of ESG. But in other industries like construction and infrastructure, they will see ESG as a compliance only, and they won't really embrace it until it's legally and regulatory, a full regulatory requirement.
Yeah.
But ESG do give some incredibly insightful areas beyond just the financial motivations of the success, what makes a successful company. So therefore, when a board starts to realize, actually, God, we could have analytics across HR, or every single facet, all their stakeholders, everything that's involved in running an organization. I can describe this a little bit easier. When I was a management consultant and I would be going into the boards, whatever the consultant or the person presenting to a board thinks for their half an hour slot or 20 minutes or whatever, they think that's really important. But when I've been on the PLC side and I'm on the board and people are coming in, it's a completely different perspective. It's very hard because everybody's presenting in different ways, different methodologies. Everybody's got nuanced thinking about what is important. But the great thing, if an organization had an operational dashboard which is consistent, it's going to be a lot easier to see where all their risks are across all their dimensions. Not just tensions that very good articulated people can characterize as important to the company, but actually a consistent. And I think ESG has yet to be fully discovered of how powerful that will be to enable boards to have that window on really what are the key metrics that matter.
Totally agree with you. And I really would love to see this come to fruition, because if ESG is embedded in every initiative, every capital allocation, every supplier decision, then governance cannot be retrospective. It has to be built into workflows. And that would be the turning point where we move from theory to infrastructure, governance reviews, compliance audit, RACI role structures, scheduled automation. That aren't conceptual ideas, they are systems. So when organizations undergo compliance audits, such as SOC 2 accounting audits, what becomes immediately visible is whether governance lives in documents or in systems. So how can platforms like yours support traceability, ownership, and accountability in audit-heavy environments?
Well, the way we do address that issue is we use a tool which has been in project management for years called RACI matrices. And RACI is RACI, who is responsible, who takes the action, who has to be consulted, and who needs to be informed. Now, historically, these sort of allocated roles, well, they're not allocated. People talk about, and I suppose in a way you have to go back one step beyond that, is that we often find when we start talking to help onboarding a client, they actually don't have a formalized workflow process. So it's very hard for organizations to then start allocating RACI at the end of, say, a workflow or a gateway close, a stage
Right.
gateway. Now,
Yeah.
so how we achieve that is because everybody in our platform, every user, is given their own personalized dashboard. So they have a personalized dashboard of all their tasks, their roles, their project tasks, project activities, their document activities, document tasks, and obviously stakeholder tasks. And what that means is they go in and they just simply, purely, and it can be just on their mobile phone, to go and do that activity, and any allocated or assigned tasks and activities are given to them personally. They don't necessarily get to see the whole platform, and nor do they need to do that. But what it means is that people naturally have this predication to go and work on all the things that they can do. So you get incredible efficiency in that way. Now, the result of that is somebody needs to be consulted. They can just be that activity. There can be set up a telephone or their own separate, and then they can put down, log, I have, that has been ticked, that has been actioned. So you get this ability to see, there could be 20 activities for each workflow stage gate closure. That activity, people can do those things independently, when they've got time. And then the director, to move the project to the next workflow, can go through and see. Now, the point is that director could be, or he or she could be in the queue at Tesco's. It comes through on their phone. They can see that 20 activity, people have done loads of activities. It's now all down to them. Now, historically, without technology such as myConsole, they would say, well, I'm in the office next week. We'll sign that off. We'll get that through. No, you do it now. You can do it now, because on your phone, we've put prompts and checklists for the board director, or for whoever the director is, to actually go through and do that review straight away, and actually undertake their due diligence review of all of the aspects, check that those things have been done properly. Now, the benefit of that is that the workflow then shifts, or maybe I'm doing it the wrong way on screen, but it will shift to the next step, and a whole new set of default actions and tasks are allocated to the RACI roles. It's instant. And that means that people can get on straight away. So the enormous efficiency is very beneficial. Now, from an audit perspective, people can go in and look and see when all these things were done. And it's incredibly powerful, because, I've been involved in one scenario which cost a business, probably did cost the business, but it was something like £200 million, where it was on a bid environment. It was to do with, I think it was cleaning a nuclear power station or something. And the contractor legal team had not checked the contract of who was going to pay for the clear up. And the bid advanced in the contractor. They won the work, and then they got into it. And then there was that discovery of £200 million worth of cleanup, or whatever that sum is. But I'm just trying to illustrate who signed it off, and you've got no audit trail. You've just got hearsay. And I definitely would have looked at it, all of those things. Now we can see that person has read the contract and ticked, this contract is fine.
That's exactly the difference between saying you have governance and being able to demonstrate it. So governance is not paperwork. It's a system of trust. So let's talk about risk. Traditional organizations often focus primarily on financial risk. But ESG introduces environmental, social, supply chain, reputational, and resilience risks. How should leaders rethink risk registers in this context?
Well, risk registers themselves are incredibly powerful. The problem is they're often isolated spreadsheets held by an individual who would do risk on all projects in an organization. So they're sort of often an adjunct to the project, and it will very much depend on the risk expertise of that individual. Now, I'm not going to challenge anybody's expertise in this, but the actual risk register should be built into every single project. When it's a completely separate tool to the project, there's a chance of that being not brought into the project dimensions. And by having it as part of the project and as part of the dashboard set for every single project, we've got lots of different project dashboards. We've obviously got the consolidated composite dashboard set, but you want to have all of the dashboards on every single project. And risk, and it's not just risk, it is also an opportunity. So we've set that because sometimes failure to exploit opportunities is just as costly. So risk on a project, you want to use this as a very powerful tool, and it's not being used enough. I don't think it's not being used for all the projects because, again, people haven't got used to be thinking about it's just a financial risk or a revenue risk. For me, I was very excited about the risk register because because people can start to realize that. And this is one of the things that the board should be looking at, because my problem is that decisions need to be made quicker. And the reason boards do not make decisions quicker because they've not been getting the information in real time. You often hear it when you're in a board, we'll pick that up next week. Could somebody go away and look at it and do the work? No, I think boards are going to have to be more adaptive and flexible in the future. They are going to have to be able to react quicker. And obviously now that we can, using technology, you can gift incredibly powerful information to them. They can make decisions a lot easier and quicker. And I think that's one of the failures of the boards of the moment, is they're not really fully equipped because they're not getting this information. But boards in the future will get incredibly powerful information and insights that they can make important decisions a lot quicker. You've only got to look at people like Elon Musk. He's actually in 15 years created 3 separate billion-dollar worth businesses. And that's because he's making those decisions and computing all that huge amount of information himself. But it just shows you what can be done if you're making quicker, faster decisions to get that edge for your own business.
Have you seen cases where digital workflow visibility reduced crisis exposure?
Have I seen cases? If I have, I best not be talking about those things. Have been enormous, but I've signed NDAs, so perhaps we best not go there.
Yeah, but I bet there are many cases because without visibility, you can't really see where the gaps are and work on them. So we often hear numbers attached to digital transformation, such as time savings, cost reductions, error reduction, cycle time improvement. But beneath those numbers is something more important, and I think it's clarity. So what changes culturally when workflows become digitized and transparent?
Yes, that's a critical element. Is the culture of an organization. And I think one of the things that digital transformation technology enables is actually to embed better culture. The SaaS platforms generally, as in all technology, can be updated every day, every week. And the Tesla car gets updated once a week, and they actually put new tech, new features and functions. And what you are able to do using, to adapt culture and improve is this thing called continuous improvement. And if you have missed sign off or an approval step, then you can actually rebuild that in instantly, within seconds. You can put that into play. I mean, the difference between management technology that we're using today and say ERP systems from 10 years ago, they could never be changed. They're written in stone. People would put up with different titles and different naming, but now you can literally change it instantly. It's so customizable. Everything is in our platform, it's incredibly customized. So self-service, customizable. Culture can be adjusted and improved based on the learning. One of the features we built into the platform is at each stage gate is you can capture improvement opportunities. You can challenge what could be improved, what can't be, and you can keep a list. It takes 40 seconds. It's all drop down tick boxes and things. To drop down, not tick boxes.
Yeah, so digitalization isn't about speed alone. It's about reducing ambiguity. And ambiguity is often the hidden risk. And having this democratized and easy way to achieve both ambiguity reduction and speed is the best solution that we could find in such situations. I'm so excited to see this happening with myConsole. I think it's going to bring a lot of change, a good impact change in the market to many organizations. Phillip, you transitioned from enterprise consultant to founder. What did entrepreneurship teach you that large organizations never could?
Wow, that is a very expansive question.
Yeah.
Corporate bodies are, by their very nature, they have to be slow and considered, and I think it's a lot easier to make decisions when you're with a smaller team. Exciting and new things are happening and it's new. So there is a dopamine hit in working as an entrepreneur, I suppose, which I am,
Yeah.
that is different than the sort of the dead hand of certain corporate bodies. The problem is it's a very unpredictable and scary world to be in, and you're pretty much having to use your own wits and your own brain to drive forward every day. It's a very hard thing to have to do. It's not easy. You've got to be pretty resilient and actually enjoy it. And I suppose I'm very fortunate. I love that cut and thrust of. I was on a call this morning, and there's some incredibly exciting things coming down the pipeline at us, and some of our business partners we're working with, some of our clients become business partners because they see incredible opportunities as well. And they're excitedly telling us about things that they're discovering and happening. It's a very, it's just exciting. You can make so much change once you've got the platform. There's two excitement levels. One, when you're developing it and creating the platform, which is hard, and using an intellectual. We've always enjoyed the intellectual challenges of working with clients because you learn so much. But then when you've got the platform, then people are seeing what the possibilities are. And that's quite exciting because we're like, oh my God, sometimes I have to admit we didn't even see how that, one of the great capabilities of our platform is this ability to manage portfolios and ecosystems. Now, we built that in really primarily as a method for, say, a large client to be able to manage 200 different business units. That same tool can now be used to allow a sort of portfolio of companies, like in a private equity company, a fund manager. So they could have 100 of their portcos, their portfolio companies, all to be able to log in to the platform and actually undertake their entire ESG across the whole of their own individual journeys. So the portfolio manager, the fund manager, can actually have a complete window view across all of their portfolios. I'll be honest, I'll fess up, that was not an intention. It was one of the features we thought would be very useful for a corporate, obviously, to manage their organizations. But when you start realizing what that can do, and we're talking to chambers of commerce, you're talking to public sector bodies that could have 1,000 suppliers they want to do things to, to undertake assessments or readiness assessments. And then they can also then start to manage and do their own ESG at a low, affordable cost. It gets very exciting.
Amazing. Many times in research cycles and product design, features emerge, and they weren't intentional, but as you work through the problem, you will find different angles that you could fix the problem with. So when translation is missing, alignment breaks. This is what I see. And if you could give one piece of advice to leaders navigating ESG and governance transformation today, what would it be?
Wow. Well, my advice would be that you probably haven't got too much choice in this. I would jump on this very quickly. A lot of organizations are voluntarily embracing it. It is about regulations, new regulatory requirements coming down the line. They're not going to go away despite what, say, Trump is saying, because once public bodies and governments around the world realize that they do need to have an insight on the impacts of the environment around every company's environment, then not that Pandora's box has been opened. There has been, obviously, we've seen this in Europe with CSRD, the framework standard that was being put out, and it has been obviously pulled back and de-escalated. It was probably going too fast, let's be true. The omnibus has helped scale that back, but it's still going to happen over a slower and longer period. And I would say that what people should do, company leadership teams, would be to start curating accurate information now. The problem is, and start that journey, your ESG journey now, and start to try and get it, focus, obviously, prioritize on the carbon and emissions and things, which is an HR, which is where everybody's focusing. But there will come a period of time over the next 5 to 10 years where more accurate information is going to be demanded. And so use this window of opportunity to get your house in order in those ways. It's not going to go away. It is going to continue.
Thank you so much, Philip. This conversation reinforces something really important, that reports may inform strategy, but systems deliver it, and the leadership determines whether it lasts. In a world where ESG expectations are rising, where compliance pressure is intensifying, and where the clients demand execution rather than advice, what does responsible change leadership truly require? And this is the question that I want to leave our audience with. I would like to thank you for being with us on ZeroGrade Talks, Philip. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Till next time, stay blessed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, sir. Our pleasure.